Welcome everyone to our webinar today, Moving Assessment from Compliance to Continuous Improvement. My name is Amber Malinowski. I'm the Director of Interactive Content here at Weave. I'm the one that sends you all the emails. Thank you so much for joining us. We're really looking forward to sharing with you today. I have just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. First of all, we are recording this session, so if you know someone who wanted to come and was unable, or if you want to share this with someone after the fact, please just email me, amber@weaveeducation.com. It's probably also all over those emails that you've been getting, and I'd be happy to send you the link when it's ready. We're also going to be doing a few polls during the session today so we can get to know a little bit more about you. And if you have questions during the session, on your GoToMeeting control panel, there is a little area called questions. You can expand that and you can type questions right there in that area, and I will try and help answer them. There will be a Q&A at the end that you can ask our presenter. After those questions, if we have enough time and if anyone is interested, I will do a very quick 5 to 10 minute overview of our Weave platform. And lastly, we also have a survey that will pop up after the session, and then there's also an email that comes about an hour later if you can't do it right then. We really appreciate your feedback on our sessions. This is how we design our webinar calendar so that we can get you information that you're interested in. So, without any further ado, our presenter today is Mary Clark, and she's the Director of Institutional Effectiveness at Carteret Community College in Morehead City, North Carolina. She has a background in and taught biology, and she spent the last 10 years in community college education providing leadership in strategic planning, assessment, and program review. She's also been a SACS liaison and worked in continuing education and chaired a QEP development team. So she's pretty much done everything. She's presented at SACS and at UCEA, and she's currently completing her dissertation, which I would love to clap, but I don't want to hurt your ears. I think that's really exciting, and in higher education leadership at Rowan University. And she's also just a friendly and wonderful person to work with. I've really enjoyed getting to know her, getting ready for the session today, and I'm excited she's here. And with that, Mary, go ahead.
Thank you, Amber. I really appreciate those. There's some sweet things you said. Thank you. I also want to thank all of you for coming to the webinar today. I appreciate your time and your interest, and I'm really excited to talk with you about assessment and specifically how we moved our assessment, or we're moving it, from accountability to more of a continuous improvement mindset. I told Amber earlier, and I will share with all of you, that I love assessment. I'm one of those crazy people that love it, and so my goal today is to see how many of you I can convert to loving assessment too. So our first poll, and we're going to get a poll right off at the beginning, helps me understand who's here today, and so if can you see the poll? Because I can't see it. Oh, there we go. So if you look at it, the poll, it asks you just to identify who's here, whether you're with a 2-year institution or a 4-year institution, and it just lets me know who all is here. There we go. How to make it bigger. Okay. All right. Well, now I see what it says. So it looks like I'm having a little hard time, Amber, seeing it bigger. I forget how to make it bigger. Oh, now I do. There we go. So it looks like many of you here are in my shoes too. So you might already be lovers of assessment. So that's a good thing. We've got some faculty and some administration and some deans and things here. So that's very good. I appreciate that. Just a little bit of background about myself is I have had a wonderful education or career in education so far, and I love what I do. I get to work with faculty and staff and students every day, as many of you do as well. We just get to help provide students with an exceptional educational experience every day, and it's really very rewarding. And it's one of the reasons why I love assessment and program review and strategic planning, because I believe it informs the decisions that we make providing our students that exceptional educational experience. I love assessment too because my biology background is in genetics, and so assessment is helical, so it doesn't quite come full circle. It's always got that one little step forward, and so it makes me happy. This has been a project that I've been working on for the last 5 years, and you know, I'm really pleased with the results that we're getting so far. So if we move forward here, why does this not want to go to the next slide? There we go. So the goals of our presentation here are really just pretty straightforward. They are for me to be able to provide you with a little bit of a background about the story and the things that we've done, and share some challenges that we've had and some effective practices, and certainly looking at it from an IEIR perspective. So I'm happy to see there's a lot of you here with that. But most importantly, anytime I do a presentation, I always want to make sure that I can leave you with what I call a little nugget of goodness that you can take back with you, that you can use in your own institution. So hopefully you'll be able to do that, and then I will have done a good job today. So every institution is going to take a different path to continuous improvement. But there are some steps that everybody does that are pretty much in common. And the first is that we have to have a common definition of what assessment for continuous improvement should be. What does it look like for us? What is it supposed to be? And then we need to have a really strong understanding about our current assessment culture. Where are we on the assessment spectrum? Why are folks assessing? Faculty assess all the time. If they assess from the moment students get into the classroom, until the very last day. And so, but why? Why are they doing assessment, and what are they doing with the assessments? Then we need to look at who's going to be involved, who will be the change agents that we have on campus, and what role will each of us play, and how are we going to work together to drive this change. And then most importantly, we need to have a plan, and then we have to carry out that plan. All too often, colleges and universities will say, well, if our assessment is faculty driven, and that's great, but oftentimes what that means is we just leave everything up to faculty, and they can't necessarily identify what the plan is and how they intend to get there. So here's our story, and you'll see that I have it broken down into one word, purpose, key question or problem, and a point of view. And I had a professor who taught us change management. And the professor said that before you can do any kind of changing whatsoever, that you first need to describe the problem in one word. And so for us, our one word was administrative. Faculty were assessing, and they were doing it on varying degrees, but they were assessing because they were told to. And it was top down. The administration got faculty together one day and said, we're not doing this right because SACS, our accreditor, said so. And so everybody had to get in a room and had to do the assessment in a certain way. So it was taking place, but the problem is that faculty were assessing because they were being told to. So the second thing that my professor said is that you need to define the situation that's the problem. And so in defining our situation as a problem, we were assessing to meet the requirements of the accreditor, SACS COC, and to verify that programs were doing what they were supposed to do. The third thing that my professor suggests that when you are trying to become a change agent or you're trying to lead change is to be able to focus on just one key question or one key problem. So for us, the key question was why? Why are we doing this? Why are we assessing? And then lastly and most importantly, you have to identify what point of view you are going to tackle this from. And since we were strong advocates that our assessment was to be faculty driven, we looked at the problem from that faculty point of view. And you really could look at it from, a student's point of view, your accreditor's point of view, best practices, or whatever way. So, but for us, we looked at it from the faculty point of view. Now, here's what happened, though, is that folks did feel as though they were, the general consensus was that assessment needed to meet the accreditation requirements, and that's not necessarily wrong. Some programs even had program accreditors, that they were required to make those assessments done in specific ways, and it was for accountability purposes. But to a lesser extent, our faculty also believed that assessment was being done was meant to be punitive and to keep faculty, and I'm using air quotes, in line. And there was a common question about this is, why are we being kept in line? Why is this, something that we're having to go through? So you can kind of get a picture as to where we were a little bit with how folks felt about that, and that was 5 years ago. So after doing some research on assessments and being able to find ways to be able to make changes, I went and I contacted our faculty council, and I wanted to get them on board. The faculty council would be similar to if you were in a bigger institution, maybe a faculty senate, or just any group that was a faculty only organization on campus that was used to facilitate any types of initiatives between administration and the faculty at large. As you all know, the biggest change with, or the biggest hurdle with change is buy-in. And so who better to work with faculty than faculty themselves? And so what I approached them said, could we develop an assessment council within the faculty council that would be used to drive the change? And that the idea was that this council would be the champions of change, and that I worked with them to help develop the message as to what assessment was to be, and that we had wanted the message to include the fact that assessment is continuous, ongoing, and designed to provide faculty and students with feedback to be used to drive programmatic changes, that it was not meant to be punitive. And in fact, it was something that they were doing all along, but we just wanted to develop ways of being able to better document and record what was going on. And what we found out along the way is that this assessment council was used as a faculty sounding board. When they had questions or concerns, they felt as though they could go to the council and things would not be punitive at that point. And then their suggestions and their recommendations helped us refine the process, because as you'll find out, as you go through things, that the process itself has to be flexible, has to be willing to change as well. So let's take a little bit of a closer look. So I call this, our journey of assessment for improvement. And while traveling on this journey, it's important to remember that this has to be, the assessment has to be internally driven. If we are assessing learning outcomes because a regional or a programmatic accreditor requires us to do so, then it's actually externally driven. And that, we will then be assessing for compliance, and that's not really quality improvement or continuous improvement. We want to assess because, like I said to you earlier, we want you to love assessment and we want you to find it useful. So it really does have to become an internal process. Assessment is also formative, and what I mean by that is that assessment monitors student learning by providing feedback that can be used by faculty to then be able to help students improve their learning. It results in changes in teaching, curriculum, and assessment. Now, it's important to note here that although I'm referring to this as assessment as being formative, both formative and summative assessments are used in order to accomplish this. Third thing is that assessment for improvement emphasizes continuous improvement. We want to demonstrate that gains have been made in student success, and we can use things like retention rates or licensure pass rates, even grade distributions, capstone projects, and we can show the evolution of a particular program. We can document faculty understanding and appreciation of use of assessments even, and we can do all of this in an authentically collaborative fashion. When doing all of this, we will not only demonstrate an improvement in the student's ability to learn, but we will also see an improvement in the quality of the programs themselves, in the teaching that's taking place in our classrooms, and in the overall education of our students. Now, it is important to note that although I'm making an emphasis that assessment is for improvement and not necessarily for accountability, there is an accountability factor. We do have regional and program accreditors, and they really do want you to assess learning outcomes on different levels. But the accountability factor that I would like and that I have been working with my group on doing is really looking at accountability from an internal factor. And for example, if I'm teaching, let's say Psych 101, and you're teaching Psych 201, the next level up, aren't you relying on me to ensure that every student has successfully completed those outcomes, those objectives that we've stated at the beginning of the course? So you're relying on me to provide the students with every opportunity to learn those concepts, so that when they see you, you're basing your course off of the fact that the students have this specific foundation of information. And so therefore we are accountable to one another, as well as accountable to the students, to preparing them so that they can go on to the next level. And so, yes, if we do that, we would then also be accountable to our accreditors as well. Important to note that assessment is not punitive. And I have to tell you that what I have done in almost every workshop, one-on-one session, things that I've done with our faculty, is to reinforce this. It is not punitive. It's not a gotcha document. There's no way that what we're doing with this is deciding to find ways to, show that you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. We are, however, working on ways to try to provide you with different feedback so that you can do what you do, exceedingly well. And as I stated to you earlier, this has been a labor of love for me for the last 5 years. And so it does take time to achieve. And so, it's a good thing, though. One of the other things, too, that's interesting is getting faculty to understand that not achieving 100% on outcome goals is a good thing. But it is a difficult thing, because our nature is that, we want to do everything, we want to do it right, and we want to do it well, and we want to do it well 100% of the time. But that it's okay if all of your students don't meet the outcomes all of the times, and it's okay that when they do, that you can change them. So that's kind of where we are at this point in our journey, where folks are doing such a good job. We're reaching 100% on a lot of things, and now we're finding ourselves into what comes as the next step. All right. So the next step to identifying what your college or institution wants to do is to accomplish is what do you hope to accomplish in it? And so these are just some basic things that you can get together at your group and you can identify what it is that you would want to accomplish. Obviously, we've talked about continuous improvement, but do you want to use assessment to help with resource allocations or as to be an integral part of your budget process? Do you want to use it to express accountability, the way I've just defined accountability and transparency? You can use assessment to engage the community and industry. We are a community college. We work very closely with our community and our industry partners, and assessment is a way to get them involved. You can ask them, are our graduates being presented with the skills that you need them to have? It's a key component to our strategic planning. You do want assessment to be able to identify where there's new opportunities for you to offer programs. And you can use assessment to really help support and bolster the institution's reputation. So here's where the next poll is. So where is your institution on this continuum? Are you here where we don't assess at all, or where folks believe that grades are assessment, or are you where our institution was, where we assessed because our accreditors had to, or are you lovers of assessment? So if we can look at that next poll, that would be awesome. Okay. Well, good. It looks like you're all in that the same area where we were, and it's actually really a fun time to be in that area, believe it or not, because I'm sure you see on your campuses the same as we saw in ours. There are some pockets in the college where they're doing assessment really, really, really well, and they are doing it because they love assessment, and that they're finding out how important it is. And then there are some of those other ones. I did see a couple in there, stragglers of aren't grades assessment, which I have a quick funny story. I did have a group of faculty who were completely shocked when I did say that grades weren't assessment, from the standpoint of an IEIR person, that wasn't the only way that we were going to assess folks. So I can empathize with those of you who are in that area. But if you are already to the point where your folks are doing it, and it's just a short journey to get them to get to love assessment. So good for you. I'm excited that that's where you guys are. So the next step that you have, once you've identified where your institution is who should be involved. And quite honestly, the short answer is that everyone should be involved. Assessment is got to be campus-wide. This is a true collaboration, and it will take the cooperation of all faculty, staff, administration for it to be successful. And one way to do that is to clarify some roles. So in our situation, we developed some roles, and we took it from the faculty was one set of roles, the department chairs or directors was another role, our assessment team that we had is another role, and then obviously the college administration was the other role, and I chose those four specifically because it was the feedback loop that was important to me, was to making sure that these four groups would when working collaboratively together, would have a good feedback loop. So if we look at faculty, faculty have the major role of and the major responsibility of regarding assessment. The assessment belongs to faculty, in my opinion, and that's what we operate off of. They have the closest relationship with students, and since the focus is on student learning, assessment belongs to faculty. Faculty will develop the learning outcomes, they implement the assessment, they analyze the results, and they make recommendations for changes when the changes were warranted. They also are key members in that feedback loop, where they are responsible for receiving and providing feedback. Now, for us, the chair managed the assessment process. More importantly, they were the folks that maintained the documentation that assessment was taking place. They would collect and review faculty analysis and recommendations regarding program assessment. They would provide faculty and the assessment team with information regarding what was collected, and they were responsible for collecting and storing all assessment artifacts. The assessment team provided support and coordination of the process. My office is an integral part of the assessment team, and we do all of the coordinating pieces to it, making sure that things are done on time, within the parameters, making sure that where documents are being housed and stored. We also oftentimes are a secondary source of being able to archive documentation of assessment. But we provide operational and technical support as well, the assessment team does. We are very fortunate we do use Weave in our assessment process, and so we're there to help provide that technical and operational support when it's needed. We do provide a critical analysis of assessment trends. So as part of our program review, outcome assessment is included in that, and my office will coordinate with the directors and the chairs into making sure that we have a little bit of a longitudinal study in that 5-year time period, so that the faculty can see some more critical assessment trend analysis that takes place. And again, we're going to communicate results to and from the faculty and the administration. And lastly, getting involved, our college administration, our deans and vice presidents, getting them involved. And at one point, I had an administrator come up to me privately and say, I just don't understand what it is that you want me to do. And so what we did is we went down and we defined the roles for them a little bit more clearly. And when we say a support effort, assessment effort, we mean so by investing the time and the money that's necessary in order to allow faculty to do what they need to do as far as assessment is concerned. And they can use the data to inform their strategic planning and budgeting. They can use this information to help potential donors to use them. You can use it for grant situations and so on and so forth. And I use this example because it was just such a beautiful thing to watch. We had a nursing program who consistently was coming up with students not passing a particular or not meeting the benchmark for a particular outcome. And this was really very difficult for them because they were making all kinds of changes. They were changing the assessment, they were changing their teaching, they were researching and going to other schools and trying to figure out what was going on. And finally, after they went to another school, they found out that what was going wrong was the fact that they didn't have a particular piece of equipment that was required. It was iPad was the one thing that they didn't. They didn't have tablets, and that the students were being trained on how to intake student or patient information, but they were doing it paper and pencil. And when they were getting out into the field, they were being asked to do it on a tablet. And so we presented that information to the dean. The dean put that in their budget request and made an argument with the budget department or the committee that we had. They used that data to support the purchase of the particular equipment. And what was really interesting to it is that as folks were walking out of that budget meeting, I heard them say, boy, that was really hard to say no to. So being able to use assessment in that type of way really supports faculty, and that's that administrator's opportunity to be able to demonstrate that. And then the key thing with this is that it was really important that the administrator go back and let the faculty know how the assessment results were being used. It's one thing to have this great alignment of roles, but then not providing that, communicating how the information was being used really can make it a negative, take a negative toll on the situation. So that's an important lesson that we learned. Now, I've mentioned a lot that assessment is faculty driven, and I wanted to share with you at this time why it's so important that we wanted to have the important role that faculty played in the process. These are some quotes there that were these are actual quotes that I had where faculty had said only other faculty will understand what we go through, and so they'll have a better context and evaluate our outcomes more fairly. We do a peer assessment piece with our outcomes, and so this was one of the faculty made sure that I understood that they were appreciative of that. Being reviewed by a peer takes away the concern of having someone looking for just weaknesses. You know, they feel supported and they feel that they've got somebody who's got their back. And then lastly, you know, a person being invited to be part of the assessment review team. They thought it was such an important piece for them to be involved in, because not so much because they had the power over being able to, you know, peer assess another thing, but they learned what they had learned from the other departments that they got such a big kick out of. So these are all good reasons for why we're doing what we're doing. Now, I've talked with you now for about 30 minutes already, and the important piece is that we haven't even gotten to a plan yet. These are all the background things that you have to do first. So once you've gotten all of that completed, these are 5 steps to help you move from compliance to assessment for continuous improvement. And the first thing is to generate a purpose, to embrace an improvement mindset. We're going to use a common language in order to do that. You want to provide faculty with contextual data about their students. It's easier in some aspects for a smaller institution, but in any way, whatever data that's contextual data you can give faculty out, I promise me it makes a big difference. We want to demonstrate that we're dedicating the time and the resources necessary to act on the results. It's that closing the loop piece that we need to make sure that we're following through with. And then communication is a big thing, communicating the ways that we're learning from and acting on the assessment results. And then number 5 is rewarding participating faculty. And I'm going to talk with you a little bit in the next few minutes about each of these. So without a purpose, we're just really going through the motions, and we're never going to get out of this assessment for compliance mindset. So one way to do this is by having this shared vision and using a common language. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to build consensus to build what is our vision of assessment. We have to agree that assessment benefits everyone. And there are specific ways that you can identify how your assessment will benefit faculty, students, and administrators. These are our key roles that we talked about. I believe it's very important that the benefits of assessment are felt by all stakeholders, especially students, faculty, and administrators. Faculty are able to determine what's working and what isn't, and you do it all the time. But you know, sometimes your assumptions can be proven a little bit wrong, and I'm going to give you an example in a minute about our math teachers that we had, and when we were able to provide them with some additional information, they were actually able to see that they, they had really had a little bit of a different perspective because they didn't have all the pieces to the puzzle. So we're going to show that by building this consensus, it then is going to become internally driven. It's going to be completely transparent, and that it's going to give faculty a voice in not only developing the SLOs themselves or the learning outcomes themselves, but how the data should be used. This is a way of being able to develop an authentic collaboration, and it builds and strengthens connections between curricular and co-curricular programs. So, excuse me, because we're involving everyone, and because we're getting all kinds of partnerships together, you'll be able to strengthen and build those additional connections. And then these are perfect outlets for faculty development. It's ways to be able to show faculty that what they're doing is these are good learning opportunities for themselves as well. Next, this is very important to me, as I explained to you earlier. This is providing the faculty with contextual data. We provide our faculty every year with a year-end report. And in the year-end report, we try to provide each individual program with as much information about their students as we possibly can, so we can help them with big picture understanding. Faculty can be siloed sometimes, and I don't mean that as a negative thing. I just mean that that's what happens sometimes. We get in our own little world. It's very important to us, and we spend most of our time there. So being able to give faculty some additional information before they start assessing the students in their individual programs helps give them this broader understanding. And we do use things like placement scores, grade distributions, assessment results from prerequisite courses, results from other student success classes that we've identified, some survey results on things like study habits and attitude towards learning, so that we give them as much information as we possibly can, so that they when they have a better understanding of what the students are bringing to the classroom with them, so that it helps them with their not only their teaching strategies but their assessing strategies as well. We talked about dedicating time and resources, and again, this is important because it builds confidence in the faculty, and what they're doing is not being looked at punitively. It gives them a sense of support. It will strengthen faculty's interest in assessment because they do have that better understanding of the big picture. And how you do it is you engage in regular discussions about assessment. When there is the opportunity, if you're an administrator, when there is the opportunity to allocate resources to a particular program and you can be supported by the results of assessment, I would recommend doing that. And then again, using the same information for any new program requests that can come about as a result of assessment. Dialogue, an open dialogue, and a free flowing of information regarding teaching and learning and assessment is key. These conversations will take place at every level within and among programs between faculty, staff, administrators, other colleges within a university, other universities across the country, and so forth. As much as we look to other data such as job attainment rates or workforce entries or success rates that we have along those lines, licensure pass rates, I've mentioned that to you before, we want to be able to communicate all of that information, and faculty will become more open to communicating it once they are comfortable with the notion that it's not punitive. We want faculty to talk with one another. We want them to learn from one another. Oftentimes, we can hear faculty saying, well, what did you do? You know, your licensure rate. We have one program who has for years now just gotten nothing but 100% on their licensure pass rate. They're being asked by other programs, what are you doing to getting the faculty to, or to get your students to get this 100% pass rate? And what that's happening is it's causing that particular program to go back and look at their assessments like, well, I don't know, we just do it. So they're having to look more critically from it, and then sharing the information among the different programs. And it's just been a wonderful thing. My office has been working on gathering those additional pieces of information for students, about students, and then we are together analyzing and comparing what works and sharing the results. So if we've got one more poll, if you could put that other one up for me, and we'll look at the next one. So the question is, do you have a reward or recognition program at your institution? And it seems like a silly request or a silly thing, but let's see. This is one of those polls where it's okay if you say, I don't know, too. All right. Well, that's interesting. Very good. For those of the 29% of you that do have an employee recognition program, you're going to love this. For those of you who don't, it might be a little bit more difficult to do so. The reason why I ask about employee recognition program is that I believe very strongly that you must celebrate successes and recognize the efforts of those faculty that are putting into assessment. I mean, let's face it, assessment takes time. You know, not only does it take time to change assessment cultures, but it takes time to actually do the assessment. And faculty time is already stressed as it is. So it's important to reward faculty who are putting the time and the effort into the assessment. And although there's a time and a place for cake and balloons, I'm all for cake and well, food in general, but I would suggest that the reward should match the effort that's needed to achieve the success. And so, for example, allowing interested faculty to conduct and submit research on student learning or assessment in their field to fulfill their research requirements would be one way that you could reward faculty. Now, there's several other things that can happen with this as well, is that by doing it this way, you are reinforcing the importance of assessment, but you're also giving the faculty member another way of being able to learn from and share information with other faculty members. And nursing journals love this kind of research. The social sciences are getting, like social workers and even engineers are getting into doing this kind of research. Another way is perhaps allow faculty to use particularly innovative or engagement assessment activities as part of their service to the university or to the college that they have. This one is not necessarily a popular one, but maybe a little release time for a particularly broad or detailed assessment project. And use participation in college-wide assessment activities as criteria for being for any employee recognition program that you have. So those of you who do have the recognition program, use this as one of the criteria in order to do so. And so what I found is that just simply rewarding folks and acknowledging, it's not so much the reward itself, it's more the acknowledgement that those of us in IEIR and in other administrative positions recognize the time, the energy, and the expertise of faculty in order to do assessment and to do it well and to do it for continuous improvement. So what, if I can get this to switch. So what I have for you here is that's my story. You know, that's our story. That's where we are so far as an institution. And that, you know, what is your story? Here's where I would say that if this is something that you're interested in doing, that think about that one word. What is that one word that describes where you are? You know, what is your purpose? You know, what would folks say your purpose was for assessment? And what is your key problem or key question? And whose point of view do you want to look for? This will start your journey, and it'll help you to loving assessment. So I thank you all for the opportunity to share this with you today. And if you do have questions, and I'm happy to answer them. And there's my little key publications. This is just a little schematic that we do where we combine our planning and our assessment activities so that we can see what's done and when and where. That's part of our plan and our journey. And then if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And if you want to contact me directly, there's my contact information.
Thank you so much, Mary. That was wonderful as always and very, very helpful. I think you guys have such a great story. Lots of really useful tips in there. Just a reminder, if you do have questions, there's a little question area on your GoToMeeting control panel where you can ask those, and there are a few that have come in already. Could you talk about how your faculty and staff share assessment results across campus, or how they share best practices between and among departments?
Sure. We well, not to be a shameless plug for Weave, but we do put all of our assessment into our Weave program, and that reports come out from that Weave program that we have. And then, so my office gets the report. One way that we do this is my office gets all of the reports, and I combine them, put them all together into a year-end report, an annual report that we do at the end of the year. And that's shared. We have a shared computer drive, and that's put out there, and that's shared with all the faculty. But I think our most effective way is we do our program review, and each program review each year, they do a presentation to the faculty, and it's really set up more like a learning community. And one of the things that they do in their program review is they share the results, you know, that longitudinal study that I talked about a little bit earlier. They share the results and the things that they did, and then there's an open dialogue at that point where faculty can make recommendations and suggestions, and that they can learn from one another.
Wonderful. That's very helpful. The next question, how do you define a program at your institution?
Programs are a little bit more easily defined on our applied sciences and health sciences. They would be individualized programs of study. On our arts and sciences level, it's a little bit more difficult, where a program is defined by degree. So we have an Associate of Arts degree, an Associate of Science degree, an Associate of Fine Arts degree, and that's how a program is defined on that level. Like I said, on our applied sciences, and our health sciences, nursing is a program, accounting is a program, um, early childhood education is a program. So it depends upon the individual program of study at that point in the game.
Great. Got a couple really good ones here. They're coming in so fast, I have to scroll back up. Do you consider surveys a part of assessment? And if so, how heavily is that information weighed?
It depends upon the individual program. Some of our programs who have external accreditation, they rely very heavily on surveys. They're required to do employer surveys, graduate surveys, surveys of students who are currently enrolled, and then all courses that we have are surveyed at least once a semester regarding. Those are our I call them student opinions of instruction. And those are done annually and given directly to the faculty member. So the answer is that it really depends upon the program, and it depends upon the faculty member how heavily they're weighed. But we do use them. I'm a big advocate of like I said, of doing some qualitative as well as quantitative assessment and analysis as well. So we do use surveys that way too.
Great. You have two questions that are a little bit similar. Could you touch on how your support units, student affairs, administrative and student support services fit into what you discussed today?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and that's part of the journey that we have that's changing. If you're a SAC-COC institution, we are the class of 2019, so our accreditation report is due next year, and so we've been working on our QEP, and the big focus of our QEP really is our support services and what role they're playing in the assessment piece. Now, they are assessed through a program review independently. They go through a program review the same as any academic program would, but right now they play more of a cursory role in the assessment piece. I mentioned a little bit about co-curricular activities or programs and things, and that's kind of where they're starting to make a little bit of an inroad. But to be honest with you, we're not there yet where they play the role that I would like for them to play.
It's the next part of your journey.
Yes, ma'am.
Who is on your peer review team, and how many programs do they review?
Oh, good question. We're in the process of making a change with that as well, too. And so what it has been is that the peer review team was made up of the vice president and myself. We were the only non-faculty members that were on the peer review team. And then there were 5 faculty members that came from other areas. So, and they would review between 4, and I think the most we ever did was 8, and that was a really bad year. I mean, because that was a lot to review at one time. So, but typically it was about 4 programs that go through review each year, because we're small, so we can do it that way. What we're changing to, and what I have worked with colleagues that are in much larger institutions, is that we've had several review teams, so that, and really trying to keep the number at, 4 or 5. So if you were a much larger institution, it made sense that, let's say you had to do 15 reviewed in one year, that you would have 3 individual review teams, and so that you would try to keep that number down smaller. One of the keys that we had to it is that we wanted to have as few members of administrative people on the committee as possible. In years past, we had many more administrators. As a matter of fact, I will tell you, at one point in the game, there was hardly any faculty on it, on our review teams, and found that faculty had very little input because they didn't want to say it in front of the administrators for fear that they were going to get their colleagues in trouble. So once we removed the deans and chairs and folks off of the review team, much better input from faculty, and so that would be definitely a recommendation.
That's really good advice. What is the difference in the composition and function of your assessment council and assessment committee?
Um, it's one is a subgroup of the other, so it's just a smaller group. And so, the assessment council is a much larger group of faculty members that also include administrators, and the assessment team, the smaller group, is really just faculty.
Okay. What is your opinion on dissertations and qualifying exams as assessments of graduate programs?
Ooh. Well, as I said to you before, I think that there's some other data that can be presented and can be used in assessing students, and I think that certainly qualifying exams or things like that for graduate students would be a fair assessment of where they were at that time. I don't know that I would use it as an ending assessment, but I think usually, if you were going to do something like a pre and a post test, then I would think that they would play an important role that way.
And what is your cycle for program reviews? Do you do them every 5 years?
Yes.
Okay. And then I think we have time. There's one more here. Do you have kind of an action planning process where things roll forward into the next year for the assessment process, and how does that work?
Can you repeat that question?
Yes. What method do you use to track plans for the next year? Some people call them action plans that might be related to assessment outcomes or findings, and how do you make sure that those don't get lost, that the people aren't just completing the same assessments, but getting those plans in place to actually change what they're doing if needed?
Yeah, good question. We actually have a year after report that is filled out and completed by the chair. When I was going through the roles, I should have, and I apologize for not mentioning that as well, that we have that and after action report that is done a year out, and so that way it helps us keep track of, and that I showed you that little graphic where we have our assessment and planning cycles written down. Those 1 year reports are included in there, and again, my office is responsible for making sure that notices go out to everybody to get the reports in, and they do actually turn them in to me. For me to maintain them, but we have a committee. The committee will get, the assessment committee will get together and they'll go over them as well.
That sounds like a good process. I think we've made it through all of the questions, so that's good. Again, Mary, thank you so much. That was very, very helpful. Lots of good questions and good participation, and thank you everybody for coming. We really appreciate it. I have a few minutes. I am going to, for those of you who are interested, I will go over the Weave platform if you'd like to see it. But Mary, is there anything else you want to say before we switch gears and do that?
No, I just want to say thank you to everybody who came and stayed for the presentation. And honestly, truly, if you have any additional questions or you want me to share things with you, I'm happy to do so. My contact information is there. Please feel free to reach out to me, and I'll respond to you lovingly.
And she will. She's absolutely lovely. If for some reason you didn't write this down or you misplace it, you can contact me, and I will also try and get you what you need. So thank you so much.